They were late, and then they were on. Anyway, it's all good. Don't blame God love TNB. So I still have my mic on. I'm gonna make sure it's turned off.
Why? You should leave it on.
Here's Chantal, Khoury, in the Sherving Songs document. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to the Beaverbrook Art Gallery. I'm John LaRue. I'm the manager of collections and exhibitions here, and it's a great privilege to be in this space. Look around you. Take a minute and look at both of these walls. Just take a quiet moment and look at it. Take a look, Chantal. Thank you so much, Chantal, for sharing this. This is Chantal Khoury's work. And this is actually the first exhibition that I was able to do of a contemporary New Brunswick artist that was of my choice. And to put you, thank you for saying yes to the privilege of me inviting you here and to be in this really important space. Remember, for 50 years, the Dali hung there. It's a very important space. And so one of our mandates here is to really encourage just an appreciation and a dialogue of contemporary art, but also contemporary New Brunswick art, in a place where the visual arts have mattered so much for so long. And it's really exciting to have, I really wanted to start this new series of contemporary artists with a really unique voice that are really sort of pushing the boundaries of contemporary painting. It's a really exciting time to be a painter in Canada. And with Chantal, it was wonderful to work with her, and these are going to be up for a few months. Chantal Khoury, as many of you know, she's working on her MFA now at the University of Guelph, beautiful town, great university, concentrating on painting, and she's really pursuing the idea of exploring the diaspora of Middle Eastern people, and certainly in the idea of I don't want to give too much of what you're talking about away, but just the idea of imagery and sort of the idea of nostalgia and stories and the visual, and it's fascinating work. And so I know her newer stuff is over here, and there's a lot sort of going on in here, but it's a real pleasure to have you here, and I know you've got this really strong New Brunswick presence, and thank you for coming back and doing this, because Fredericton will always be home, but I'm really looking forward to the things you're going to do in the future. And so it's great to have this lecture in this wonderful space. Great to see so many people. So ladies and gentlemen, Chantal Khoury.
Thanks, John, for that amazing intro. Not sure I deserve it or not, but I'm very thankful. I was here 10 days ago, so I'm a bit like in a tornado right now, but I'm really happy to be back and see a lot of people who I haven't seen in many, many years, and some more recent. I'll just get right into it because I know you've been waiting a little bit. I just want to start by saying thank you to everyone at the Beaverbrook who put so much work into putting this show up. It's really meaningful to have my work here. I grew up coming to the Beaverbrook as a kid, and yeah, I'm really touched by it, and the team at the Beaverbrook works really, really hard to make all of these shows happen. So if you haven't been around the gallery, I really recommend you go see what's going on, because it's some stellar stuff happening. Special thanks to Ada, John, Christina, and Tom Smart, who's not here right now. I also want to thank the University of Guelph for awarding me a travel grant to be able to be here today. Otherwise, I would not be able to be here and leave school and go back to teaching on Monday, so I'm really grateful for that. Okay, I'll just get right into it. So, I decided to separate this talk in 5 parts. I'm going to be really casual about it. I have a tendency to kind of speak off the cuff, so I apologize in advance if I get on a tangent. I'll try to stay focused. So these are the 5 points that I'm going to talk about, just in terms of a timeline. So number 1, women as subject and object, starts about roughly 10 years ago, and then I'm going to lead up to the work that I'm doing now. So we'll start with women as subject and object. This is the type of work I was looking at about 10 years ago. It's work by Mika Kato. she builds these miniature maquettes of dolls that are quite beautiful. I don't have a photo of them. And then she paints them in oil, incredibly large scale. What I was interested at this time was the femme identity and just creating identity from a women's perspective. So really there's a lot of play in her work. A lot of points like the creation of identity, intimate distance, masquerade, things like that. So just before I continue, I'm gonna read a quote. It's not that long, I promise. It's by Craig Owens, who's an American critic. Well, he's since passed actually, and so he's a postmodern critic and was the senior editor of Art in America and a professor at Yale University and Barnard College. So this is from an article he wrote called The Discourse of Others, Feminists and Postmodernism, and it was written in 1983. Among those whose representations are denied all legitimacy are women, excluded from representation by its very structure. They return within it as a figure for the sublime, for there is no certainty, no shortage, there is no certainly no shortage of images of women. Yet in being represented by, women have been rendered an absence within the dominant culture. In order to speak, to represent herself, a woman assumes a masculine position. Perhaps this is why femininity is frequently associated with masquerade, with false representation, with simulation, and with seduction. So that's what I was thinking about when I was painting works like this. At the time, this was my roommate in Montreal. When I had just moved to Montreal, I was 19 years old. Not when I painted this, but I moved to Montreal when I was 19. And so I was thinking a lot about the women, the figure, intimacy, but also a distance, if that makes sense. I was also looking at resources like Vogue magazine, especially Vogue magazine from Europe, so Paris Vogue, a lot of fashion stuff, which was very popular amongst my artist friends at the time. So again, thinking about the masquerade and thinking about identity and kind of what women kind of have to go through to move in this world, things like that. So this was the type of work I was still doing at that time. The one on the left is called Golden Mean. It's from 2014. And the one on the right is called Poser, also from the same year. I first showed these at my first solo show at the UNB Arts Center in 2014, which was 2 years after I graduated from Concordia. That was a big show for me, and I was really, really grateful to have that. So the UNB Arts Center actually owns the one on the right. This is work not by me. It was my mentor and professor at Concordia University. Her name is Eliza Griffith. And I guess I'm showing this because she kind of taught me that to not be afraid of things like color, which was not in fashion when I was in school, and the figure, which was also not in fashion when I was in school. So she was really, really encouraging at the time when all I wanted to do was paint the figure, the woman figure, and that's it. And then I got into a little more group dynamics a little later. This is from 2016. I also want to mention around this time, when I moved to Montreal, I got something called Bell's palsy, which is a paralysis of one side of the face, and I had it for 9 months. And I'm mentioning this because that experience as a 19-year-old, having something like that really gave me a lot of confidence to continue doing what I'm doing. That's a really vulnerable time for a woman, and so these works I think kind of like transcend through that experience. There's a couple more works. of, well, one from 2016 and a Momode from 2015. Again, still dealing with women, vulnerability, but I was trying to find empowerment through these works. So I don't see them as delicate.